Ideal Protein is a doctor-designed, coach-led ketogenic weight loss protocol that uses food as medicine to empower you to lose weight and live your healthiest life.
And welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show, a podcast brought to you by the Livingston Parish News. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. And joining me today is a regular guest on the show. He and I talk about twice a month. I'm going to give him a second to introduce himself. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm great. My name is Garry Talbert, Councilman, representing District 2 in Livingston Parish, which is typically the Watson area, northwest corner of the parish.
Right, and today we're going to be talking about drainage. We've had a couple of conversations in the past, you and I, but we're going to try to stay pretty focused on that today. Excuse me. So we had I guess you can call it a drainage summit here in Livingston Parish. It was sponsored by Representative Buddy Mincy Jr. Moving forward from that, there were items on the agenda from last week's parish council meeting, wherein the unfunded districts would be repealed, and a more consolidated district would be put in its place. So we're going to get into District 2 in just a second, because District 2 is different from District 5, which is different from District 1, and those, of course, are the three funded gravity drainage districts. But wanted to kind of get a feel from you on how that passed muster with the council, and how y'all feel about that moving forward.
Well, I mean, basically, the business that we handled last Thursday was just to repeal the existence of gravity districts 6 and 7, which were unfunded districts representing, most of the east side of the parish, or actually all the parish that didn't consist of 1, 2, and 5. Repealed them, formed one district, which we call Gravity District 8, in an effort to, I guess, look for funding, as a mechanism to try to fund that district. Whether, it be a flat fee, whether it be sales tax, whether it be a property tax. I don't know what avenue they're looking for at this point in time, but they wanted to create a district that kind of addressed the watershed to that side of the parish and solve some of the issues, because typically, if you go look at the way the taxes within the parish are generated, that the main tax related to DPW is respect to roads, and so you can do some drainage with respect to roads, but you can do some roadside ditch work, you can do some little bit down some laterals that cross roads, but to just start cleaning ditches, cleaning, canals and different things out, you're probably getting a really gray area or shaky areas, whether that revenue is actually dedicated to that. So, they have some problems. They need some things addressed. So, typically they've tried to pass taxes, both different districts in the past. So I think they decided to put it together as one, looking for some grant money, trying to put together a program that, if they were able to get a tax or fee or whatever passed, that they could move forward with, working with a funded district.
Right, and those taxes that they had attempted to pass in the past, one of the things that had kind of gotten in their way was homestead exemption. Passing a property tax in those areas was slated to not really raise enough money. To operate a drainage district, they would have to be mostly focused on grant acquisition. So it's kind of interesting because, excuse me, as they combine those districts, you're looking at sort of a north-south drainage flow. That's something that you deal with. You're in the very north side of a large watershed on, they call it, I guess, the Livingston Ridge, I think is what they call it, but we're on the western side. So in Gravity 2, which is, as you said, the Watson area, you've got everything from hills to swamps, and, a lot of different ways to deal with it. So, from that standpoint, part of the Drainage Summit was to have a discussion on how the funded gravity drainage districts can operate. And 2 affects 5 and 1, correct?
Absolutely. We've got some, significant laterals or canals that run through 2, that go through 1 and go through 5 as they seek their way to, whatever tributary they dump into, be it the Amite River, be it, Lake Marpaw, whatever the situation is. We talk about philosophy, Gravity Two's got a pretty simple philosophy: get water through Watson as fast as possible.
Right.
Um, because that's what's best for that district. It might not be what's best for the parish overall, but they don't answer to the parish overall. They answer to the taxpayers of Gravity Two. So consequently, that's been their philosophy. Just get the water through Watson as fast as we can.
Right.
And that's kind of where this concept of, a parish-wide gravity drainage district would come into play. Because what's best for Watson might not be best for Walker and Denham.
Right.
Because all we're doing is trying to get the water off of us as quickly as possible so that we don't create, flooding issues. And it's getting the water to them faster. And so then they've got to deal with our water plus the water generated within, within their district. Where if we had a parish-wide approach to this, we might look at, retaining water in Watson in some areas and then, releasing it slowly. And there's a lot of different aspects to this. But, until the powers that be feel that there's enough support for a parish-wide, district, we're going to continue to operate with these funded districts individually. And so sometimes they're going to conflict on what's best for, the whole group.
Sure. And I mean, let's talk about that for a second, because it is interesting, when you're thinking about, when you're thinking about two, and which is your district, getting it out of there and into one, what one is trying to do is get their water out as quickly as possible, either through Grace Creek or through the Amite River, mostly through Grace Creek. But what's interesting about that whole situation is once you reach the southern part of the parish, suddenly you're kind of at cross paths with those folks down there. You and I have talked about it in the past. At one point, I know Councilman Randy Delat from District 8, which is Springfield, Maurepas area, had come on the show, actually, and discussed a levee district. And it wasn't that you were too hip on that. It was just more of a question of, how's that going to work? So, from your perspective and from Gravity 2's perspective, what would be the problem if say District 8 were to form a levee district and start throwing up levees across the Amite River?
I don't know that it would adversely affect, Gravity 2 in what we do. But what the potential is that, these levee districts as they exist end up with, they're more than just about drainage. They some of these levee districts have whole police departments, and
Right.
I remember getting a ticket on a bridge, crossing the Mississippi River by a levee district police officer probably 8-9 years ago. I'm like, shoot, there ain't a levee around here. Well, it's in their area. So there's just, you want to find out what's the scope of what the levee district is going to encompass, and really what kind of far-reaching authority do they have. What we don't want to do is create a district that has some impact on what Gravity 2 can possibly do to benefit the residents of Watson. And so that's where you start looking at this parish-wide approach to drainage. When we went back, 5.5 years ago, we got elected. I came in with thinking about, how government operated. We had two sewer districts that, basically sat across the table from each other at meetings, and they just were kind of stagnant in what they were doing. We put a proposal together to merge them, took it before the voters. Shoot, they're building a second regional plant. They got plans for a third regional plant. I mean, it's doing what we thought it would do. At the same time, another concept was to merge these, funded districts along with the unfunded districts and put it before a vote of the people. I think at that time, the new councilman wanted to try, to generate revenue within their own gravity drainage districts. And the ironic thing is they had a plan. We had a flood in August of 16, and then we had an election, I think it was the spring of 17. And those things were handily beaten. And, it was kind of interesting that, after people had suffered through these floods, that they still weren't interested in funding. gravity drainage districts. So, I made mention after the election, possibly of, maybe we need to look at parish-wide drainage. And I was amazed at the pushback, not from those councilmen on the east side of the parish, but funded gravity drainage districts who thought, oh, all you're trying to do is take our money,
Right.
out of our district. And that wasn't the thought process at all. The thought process was, you know, we have the largest part of the population of the parish is paying a tax, to fund gravity drainage. There was a significant number of people on the east side that thought, a funded gravity drainage district made sense. It just wasn't the majority. So you take the large part of the parish on the west side that's already paying, sales tax, and combine that with the percentage of the east people who thought it needed to be, funded. So if you look at an election on a parish-wide basis, you would think that it would easily pass, as a replacement tax, not an additional tax. You would put forth that, if this thing passed, we'd eliminate, the dedicated sales tax in 2 and the dedicated sales tax in 1, the dedicated sales tax in 5, and create a new district. But the pushback was amazing from funded gravity drainage districts. So, you know, and that's how my philosophy or my relation to the other people about, Watson's or Gravity 2's philosophy. Somebody, we happened to be at a meeting and we were talking about it, and an elected official said, I just can't be in favor of that. You want to take money generated on the west side and spend it on the east side. And I'm like, that's not at all what we're talking about. I don't care if we keep the money within the areas that it's raised. I'm thinking that we need an approach, to look at this thing as a whole, as the whole parish. And he said, well, I can't support that. I said, well, and I told him point blank, I'm not going to burn a lot of political capital trying to get this done. I said, I have a funded gravity drainage district that represents, my district, and it works. And I said, you know what our philosophy is? To get the water through Watson as fast as we can to you.
Right.
And he looked at me like I had said something terrible, but that's truly our philosophy. We're representing the people within Gravity 2, and the best way to do that is to get the water off of them as quickly as possible. However, it's probably not good for the people in 5 and 1. So, but to study that and analyze what philosophies or what, projects could be developed to enhance that, you need input or revenue from everybody. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Gravity 2 is the smallest of the funded gravity drainage districts, not with respect to land, but with respect to budget.
Right.
Because we technically, you've got the municipality of Walker in Gravity 5, you've got the municipality of Denham in Gravity 1, and Watson just isn't there yet, with respect to all those businesses along the interstate and some of the other things that exist. So, it's coming up slowly but surely. But we are have the smallest budget of the 3 funded gravity drainage districts. So it's hard for Gravity 2 to study. Do we need to study retention? Well, where's the benefit of retention? Well, the benefit's down south.
Right.
And with our limited resources, it's hard to justify studying retention in Gravity 2 that the benefits somebody else. So, that's the conundrum that exists on whether you want a, unified parish-wide funded gravity drainage district or leave it, small as it exists now. So, right now, Gravity 2 is working in Watson. We just were granted, or we're working on, finalizing a grant from the HMGP. Yeah, HMGP funds that to study a diversion canal from Beaver Creek all the way to the Amite River. To help get some water out of Watson, because what happens is you can see it on a heavy rain that Beaver Creek will become full because the Amite River is kind of full. You know what I'm saying? And Beaver Creek is full with all the different, tributaries feeding it, and you can go like, I went to Gravesbriar in a heavy rain one day. The water was actually flowing the wrong way on the ditch, not because there was a stop up, but because there was more water in Beaver Creek than it could accommodate. And so consequently, those subdivision ditches couldn't drain to where they were supposed to. So, that's what the study is. The grant was written that 5,000 rooftops would be positively impacted if we were able to get a portion of the water off of Beaver Creek
Sure.
more rapidly. And so that's where we're gonna use that grant money. We're gonna study that. We're gonna see if the numbers work. I mean, the numbers have to work. You know what I'm saying? There's got to be a positive uh, impact. I mean, if you're going to spend $8 million building something, you better save more than $8 million in potential payouts of flood related damage or something. So that's just how the federal government works. And so you know, Gravity 2 is getting some things done. We don't have some of the ability that Gravity 1 or Gravity 5 might have to go fund a major project on their own. But what we are doing is trying to maintain our laterals, maintain, our canals, and then save match money up so that when grants become available, we're able to participate and help the people watch.
I want to talk about a couple of things real quick, and then I'm going to ask you a sort of follow-up question. But you talk a lot about retention, and I believe it was 2 years ago, y'all passed some stricter rules on retention for, I believe it was commercial and large-scale residential developments. You've also passed Freeboard. First, tell us real quick, because I'm pretty sure, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, that y'all went up to 100-year retention.
Well, I think actually what we did is we made you retain water on a 25-year storm.
Okay.
Okay, so that was the law. The law went from a 10-year, so we designed a subdivision for a 10-year rain event, and we designed commercial for a 10-year rain event. However, we're making you retain water on a 25-year event, so that, let's say before you develop, you've got water running off at rate A. And so we simulate a 25-year rain event on your property.
Right.
Calculate what the runoff would be along that, and then make you retain the difference.
Got it.
For a period,
Sure.
So as not to increase the outflow. The outflow's got to stay at A, on a 25-year rain event. And then we threw a caveat in there and said you've got to look upstream and downstream impact on a 100-year rain event. What we found is that they're just designing for a 100-year rain event.
Right.
They're designing the retention for that. That way they don't have to do all the upstream and downstream analysis. It's cheaper to study for a 100-year rain event and retain for a 100-year rain event than it is to study for 25, retain for 25, but look at the 100-year impact up and downstream.
Right.
If they just retain for a 100-year event, then there is no additional impact up and downstream. So, we kind of got some benefit into it that we're retaining a larger amount of water on site and and eliminating it at a slower rate. However, what we're not looking at is what these ditches or canals look like that we're draining into. There's no law that says if a ditch fails that we can't drain into a failing ditch. And it's something we've talked about. It's something that we're trying to figure out, because let's just say that over the years developments occurred on Beaver Creek as an example. I'm not saying this specifically. And Beaver Creek, because we've allowed all this development, is a fail now. Meaning that in a particular rain event, it's not capable of holding the water.
Right.
However, if we have another development on Beaver Creek, as long as they retain for a 100-year event, we never look at, can Beaver Creek take another drop? Because in theory, we're not putting any more water on Beaver Creek than already existed. But we know for a fact that's really not true, because 100-year rain events happen more often than you think. You know what I'm saying? I mean, used to what we call a 10-year rain event might happen 4 or 5 times a year.
Sure.
And so consequently, but you still got to go look. There's some standard that exists, and you've got to look at that standard. And so, until the numbers in the standard are adjusted, all we can do is identify what they are and study for those and calculate for those and retain for those numbers.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, when you're talking about these 10-year, 25-year, 100-year rain events, what that is that's a 3-point marker system for determining the strength of a storm. So a 10-year storm might be 6 inches over a 2-hour period over a certain amount of space. 100-year may be 10 feet over a certain amount of space over a 3-day period. There's just a lot of there's 3 different data points to measure, but that's what they're using to determine whether or not some of this is up to code or not. That's interesting that certain people have decided, well, with the incentive of, or I should say the caveat of being upstream and downstream has incentivized people to go ahead and do 4 100-year storms. Want to talk real quick about Freeboard, because I think some people get confused as to what that means. And then I'm gonna bring both of those together. But if you would give us a brief description of Freeboard.
Okay, so for example, I'm just going to pull a number out of the air. Let's say that the base flood where you were was 26, or some number.
Sure.
They would go out. You go build a house. They'd go out and put a nail in the tree,
Mm-hmm.
and with a mark beside it and said, base flood elevation is 2 foot below this nail, which means your finished floor has to be above that mark.
Right.
Well, after the flood of 16 and the issues with FEMA and other things, base flood is now +1. So what amounts is that mark, that nail you had in the tree that used to be, that was base flood was 2 feet below that. Base flood's now 1 foot below that. And so, that's basically all it amounts to. So used to, if you were building your house, if 4 years ago, you had this house plan design and everything was set and you were going to build at elevation A. Now, when you go buy a permit, you better be at A +1.
Right.
And that way you meet the new standard. And, when the parish gets all their business straight with FEMA and, we get back in, then we'll start getting credit. And we'll eventually, do some things, get enough credits, and we'll start getting a reduction on our flood insurance instead of a surcharge that we currently have.
Right, and what he's alluding to is the removal of the parish from the community rating system. There's a giant book. I have read it. It's boring, but it does list out certain. There's a lot of different chapters or sections to it on how the parish can earn points towards reducing flood insurance rates.
The ironic thing is just education is a big deal. Just by putting brochures in the library and you get credit. And
yeah, y'all run stories with us.
Like when we went from the 10-year event to the 25-year event, in theory we should have got credit, except we were in trouble and getting kicked out of the system. So, we should have got points on that. And so eventually, we'll work ourselves back in the system. They'll evaluate what we have in place. We'll get credit on some of that stuff, and we might start getting individuals reductions, on their flood insurance. And that's the goal, to try to help the residents, within the parish out and do what we can to, save them money and as much as possible.
And if you're interested in that and why the parish got kicked out in the community rating system, go to our website. Or go to Google and type in Livingston Parish Community Rating System. There's a whole saga there that we're not going to go over today. Because I do want to bring together what you discussed in terms of the development ordinance and the Freeboard ordinance. The idea is that, isn't it interesting that the parish council passes these parish-wide ordinances, but these unfunded areas still decide that they don't want to be funded. They could benefit from that funding. Having a gravity drainage district in your area actually is beneficial for your CRS and things of that nature. So what I'm asking or what I'm positing here is a statement from you as to, say you're talking to somebody who will now be in, I believe it's going to be called Gravity District
8. Gravity Drainage 8, yeah.
Somebody in Gravity 8 who asks you, you live in 2, why should I have funded gravity drainage? What is the purpose? I don't want to pay any more taxes. What what would you tell them, especially considering that they're already having drainage and development ordinances enforced upon them?
Well, okay, let's look at Gravity 2 as an example. If we've, a developer comes in and presents, a set of plans to the planning commission for review. Gravity 2 gets to look at every set of plans. Gravity 2 gets to make notes and changes about problems they have with something, whether it be a particular lateral ditch or some culvert or whatever, and they have some impact on the design process. If you don't have a gravity drainage district, then we're looking at, the parish is looking at, just the basic law. How, are they meeting the basic requirements? I'm gonna bring a particular issue out. We used to talk about a swell ditch, and the way the ordinance was written, a swell ditch didn't have to have servitude, beside it to clean it, because in theory it's a little shallow ditch. But we started seeing developers, you put a bunch of like swell ditches in the back of property, back of a development, but there's no servitude. And then you see a fence right on the edge of the swell ditch. And it became a maintenance nightmare for gravity drainage districts. And the gravity drainage districts actually, said, we either need a servitude. And so we just eliminated the exception on swell ditches. Basically, if you require servitude on a ditch, we're going to require servitude on a swell ditch. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't such a good design tool anymore, because you were taking up more land for the ditch and having to give a servitude. So you went back to a, deeper, smaller, 3-to-1 slope that would, handle more water. And so gravity drainage districts made those inputs, that look, this is a nightmare for us to maintain. Those unfunded districts don't have anybody looking out for them along those lines. And so,
right. So it's almost like having a boots on the ground consultant.
Right. You've got another engineer. You have another engineer that has one philosophy only. Will this thing negatively impact the drainage in the area? And can we maintain what's being installed? And so, Gravity 2's come to the council before and specifically asked us to, put forth some rules that are different than the parish rules with respect to culvert installation and material and different things. Because there are some subdivisions within Gravity 2 that are more than 25 years old and were designed with culverts that have a 25-year life. And so now there's a ton of subdivisions within Gravity 2 that have these lateral culverts failing and not enough servitude to put a ditch. And the district doesn't have enough money to replace all these culverts. So there's a problem. I mean, one of the things that we looked at, within the watershed initiative, and I think with the hazard mitigation money, was to, can we replace culverts? Can we study culverts? Can we create a database of every culvert within the district and analyze the quality of them so that we can put forth a plan to start addressing, some of these culverts that are failing within these subdivisions, that there's not enough revenue to go change them all. So, there's some struggles within funded districts. I can't imagine what would happen now that the east side of the parish is starting to grow. We're seeing subdivisions coming in over there, more commercial development. What's going to happen with unfunded districts and nobody specifically looking out for how that development is going to impact the overall drainage of, that area.
So there's a lot to be said, a lot of benefit outside of just having people going and cleaning out ditches from having a funded gravity drainage district in your area. Again, we want to thank Mr. Talbert. We're going to let him reintroduce himself on the way out for joining us today. We had a good little, I don't think you and I expected it to go this long, But we had a good little conversation about drainage today. So will you introduce yourself one more time, sir?
Well, it was great to be here. Anytime you want me, I'll be glad to come talk. I'm Garry Talbert, Councilman District 2, representing the northwest corner of the parish, the Watson area.
And my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys out there joining us today and watching or listening. Please remember we're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are once a week in print on Thursdays at $7 a month to get that in your mailbox. We're also online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. One last time, we appreciate you joining us, and we're going to check you out next time.